Hey, good morning. We're making amber lager, airborne. Hopefully everything goes well today with the audio. The big question with this beer is how do we create balance with roast malt? We're going to be talking through that a little bit throughout the day. Otherwise, you're going to see Josh back and forth on this fermenter right here, getting that sanitized and ready to go. You're going to have some long distance footage of me on the brew house, and I'm going to start doing my thing. All right.
Today's brew day is brought to you by my friends at Blickman Engineering. Starting a brewery is a big step. Blickman Engineering is there to help. Since 2006, they've equipped hundreds of nano breweries for success. Their new 3.5 barrel Pro Surface electric brewing system cuts maintenance and saves at least 30 minutes per brew with powerful under kettle heating. From 1 to 15 barrel brew houses to keg washers and grain mills, Blickman has what you need. Ready to go pro? Contact Phil or Tom at proseries@blickmanengineering.com.
Okay, so we got water blown through. We're open all the way up to the top. We're zeroed out. We're ready to make the beer. Okay, so what we're doing right now is I'm double checking all of my doors and valves on the mash tun. So when I start throwing hot liquor tank water in there to mash in, all that stuff doesn't hit the floor. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pumping hot water from the hot liquor tank up to the top of the mash tun, up to the grist hydrator, and we are going to pull this door open and start dropping grain at the same time. That hot water and the grain will mix, land in the mash tun, be stirred up with the rake, and that's our initial process. For you, functionally what's happening is water is coming from the hot liquor tank, which is below the mash tun, being pumped up to the top of the mash tun. This is me double checking everything because I'm recording myself and I'm paranoid I'm going to do something wrong. We're open to there, open to there. We're zeroed out. Can't forget my gloves. Can't forget my safety glasses. I'm just gonna hang it around my neck like a clock, like what's his name? I'm asking you, I'm about to ask you who was the second half of the rap group Public Enemy, and I realize I'm asking the wrong person. Flavor Flav! That's what it is. All right, we're gonna take 55 gallons of water from the hot liquor tank. That's going to get us up above the screen, and then we're going to be able to start taking our 296 gallons of strike water for this. Again, water coming up from the hot liquor tank, which is directly below the mash tun here. It's coming inline right here into the grist hydrator. I'm going to be pulling that door at the appropriate time, and grain and the hot liquor tank water are going to start blending. I also have my salt and acid ready for the mash. We'll do a little bit of water manipulation information along the way. Manipulation information. We won't dive super deeply into it on this video, but it will be something that we discuss. I'm dismantling my safety glasses. We're just about getting over the mash screen. I'm going to zero this out. I don't know why I separate the water underneath the mash tun grate. It's just a habit that I've gotten into, and it's something I still do today. Zeroing that out, I'm going to be pulling 296 gallons of hot liquor tank water out of the hot liquor tank, and pretty soon we're going to be dropping that grain. Again, using this stick for something that it was not made for. I don't know what it was made for with this whole thing, but I don't think it was that. I've got grain dropping, mixing with the HLT water right now. I've got the rakes going, mixing it up real good. What I'm gonna wanna do is I wanna prevent a whole big kind of wreath of dry grain from forming on top of the mash right now. But I also don't want a ton of water on top of it either, on top of the grain. So again, if I see that it's really thin in there, real watery on top, I speed up the grain. If I've got a lot of dry grain on top, I slow down the grain. This was one of the things that used to freak me out when I first started brewing professionally, and then I realized I could just relax and slow something down. So a mash like this is great. One of my favorite things about brewing, being in here in the morning, this space is beautiful because there's tons of windows, lots of natural light. It's a gorgeous morning, even though it's the first time we've had winter here in Cincinnati and it's February. A mash like this for our Airborne, our Vienna lager, amber lager, dude, it's gorgeous. It has a little bit of Munich, has some Vienna malt, so we have some nice kind of toasty, maybe slightly nutty aromas coming up off of it. The mash just smells great. This is one of those fun ones. Anytime you get Vienna, Munich into some of those caramel and roast malts that we're going to be utilizing in this beer, super enjoyable. We also use a malt called Cara Amber, which is a malt from Weyermann, and it's a lower level crystal type malt, relatively subtle but nice, a little bit of residual sweetness that it gives to the finished beer. And we also have, and kind of one of the topics of today, is how do you create balance with roast malt? We have a small amount of dehusked roast malt in here. There's the Carafa Special 1. I've used a couple of different of the Carafa Special products in here. They're just a roasted malt with no husk, which helps to cut down on astringency in the finished beer. One of my pet peeves with beer is when the balance isn't correct, right? So where you potentially have too much bitterness, too much sweetness on one side or the other, and it can hamper the drinkability of the beer. Bitterness and roast can work together to help balance sweetness. And so in a beer like this, which isn't very dark, it's just amber and even maybe on the light side of amber, you can use small proportions of roast malt to kind of overtake some of that. You can use small percentages of roast malt to help balance out some of that sweetness that you're back-ending into the beer. I'm adding my salt and acid right now. I'll do that throughout the mash. So we're gonna have Josh in the show note. He's just gonna be available for you at any time. I feel like I'm over-promising. It's all in the paperwork you filled out. So Amber Lager is a great beer for a pub like us to have on. There's still people that are looking for that red to amber beer. And for a period of time we had a red ale on. And one of the things we've been trying to do is kind of beef up our lager portfolio here, having the German tradition in the Cincinnati area and everything like that. So any kind of standard type pub beer that we can roll over into a lager helps to flesh out that lager portfolio for us. These German beers are nice because they really feature malt flavors, malt character. And this is one that kind of sits right in there between like a lighter Munich Helles, between something like a Munich Dunkel, which we also have on. We have a beer called Prost, which is one of my personal favorites. So yeah, it kind of wedges right in there. It's not quite all white bread. It's got a little toast, small amount of caramel, and just the edge of roast to kind of balance the whole thing out. Making beer, Josh. They did say we couldn't. That's exactly what I was about to say. What up, Mitch? It's Mitch, sous chef extraordinaire. It's Saturday morning. Usually we're not brewing Saturday, but we had, like I said, our first legitimate little bit of winter here in what I kind of think is the South, which is Cincinnati. It's the North-South or the South-North. It's not the Midwest. So right there, I sped the grain up. I started getting a pile of grain a pile of dry grain right on top of the mash bed. But one of the things I enjoy about making these lagers is they're really about simplicity. When you're making different ales, fruit forward stuff, hop forward stuff, you're really featuring those ingredients and not the malt. I don't think there's a better true showcase of malt than traditional German lagers. I don't know, it's fun. It shows if your process is tight or not. There's not a whole lot to hide behind when you're making lagers. They're not super aggressive aroma and flavor wise. So in general, speaking broadly, got about another 3.5 barrels of grain to get in here. 3.5 barrels of water to get in here. So I'm gonna tap my grist case. I still got a good amount of grain up there. This beer, with most of the stuff that we do, a little bit on the geekier brewing side, we're looking at 1.5 quarts of hot water per pound of grain. That can flex up and down based on what we want to be achieving. But a lot of these German-inspired brew houses are meant to run at about 1.5 quarts per pound. Sometimes we'll go up to 2 quarts per pound. Sometimes we'll go down to 1 quart per pound, depending on what we want to achieve. So some of you might be saying, you just said this was a German-inspired brew house. Why are you mashing in directly into the mash tun? Because I want to. And let me tell you why. We're doing single infusion here. The brew house was originally built to be mashing into the kettle, transferring all the mash into the lauter tun here. I'm using it as a single vessel at this point. It's extra work. And looking at the system itself, it didn't thrill me thinking about pumping the mash with the way this whole thing is built. So anyways, we're doing single infusion, which is adding the hot water and grain directly into the combination mash tun, lauter tun. Still, I'm just tracking my water. I've got another about 2 barrels to go. I'm gonna check my grain, see how much more grain has to come. It's getting pretty light up here, which is good. I don't like having more grain to go into the mash tun than water. I always like to be able to chase it with water. It can clump up in the grist hydrator and everything like that, and I don't like playing with that. Dude, it smells so good. I know, right? I was literally just saying how good it smells in here. I don't know if they still make grape nuts, but there's kind of like this sweet kind of grape nutty thing. Yeah, dude, it's awesome. Hey Josh, we're gonna have to remember the water today. Turning the water off when we leave. I can see us forgetting that today, having a day that's out of the ordinary. Only about a barrel left. Come on, baby. Should be timed out pretty well. So what's happening in the mash tun is, big picture, we're taking all the crushed malt, mixing it with hot water. We're gonna end up getting a temperature probably in the low 150s for this beer. At that temperature, we're gonna be allowing the enzymes in the malt to convert starch into sugar. All our grain is in. We've got another 10 gallons to go in. Then I'm gonna cut that and I'm gonna spray the residual grain that kind of sticks to the rake and to the sidewalls down. And then step 1 of this brew day will be complete. I need to get some better boots. I've been thinking about it. Yeah, these are a year and a half old at this point. Maybe if this all works out, we'll get a boot sponsor. And we can be like NBA players and just wear a new pair of boots for every brew day. It's probably a reasonable. I do like to reverse the motion of the rakes as I'm breaking down this portion of the mash. Really just trying to make sure that I have everything well mixed in there. I will run it back the other way to make sure that the grain bed is set like in the appropriate direction of how the rakes are built. Hey, just so you know, Josh, this nut on here on this hose is getting a little loose. Yeah, let's keep an eye on that because it's dumb. I'm gonna replace this with a cap, 4-inch cap. Bring this down to be cleaned. I'm gonna pull this hose just for another second. I'm just gonna rinse down the top. There you go, homie. Today's malt is handled in a way that we had mentioned before, the enzymes in the malt converting the starch to sugar. They're so efficient at this point and the process is so dialed in that process happens very quickly. I used to do a 1-hour rest on things like this. When I was brewing at home, I did. And then I've just kind of been pushing it over the years. There's a lot of research that says that conversion is happening like as you're hitting the grain to the hot water, the grist to the hot water. So anyways, I just basically do my little cleanup things, getting set up for the next process. which is Vorlauf or recirculation to clarify the wort. I get those things done, and when I'm done with those things, I just start recircling it. All right, so we are on this amber lager. We've mashed in on airborne Vienna lager, and I'm going to prepare the acid and salts for the Sparge. We're going to start the recirc here shortly, the lauter. I'm sorry, not the lauter, the Vorlauf. Yeah, I'm going to get my salts and acids measured up. So I'll be in and out of screen here as I get these things. But again, the point of all this work that I'm doing with the salt and acid is that I want to make sure that my pH of the mash is correct and that I have enough calcium, sulfate, and chloride in the mash. Right now I'm measuring out the food grade phosphoric acid that we use, and then I'm going to be measuring up the salt. And then I will show you the yeast that we use for our lagers. We have a fresh pitch today. The last pitch that we used, the last pitch of lager yeast that we had, we probably got about 10 batches of beer out of that just by fermenting with it, harvesting it, and adding it to another beer. We are on to a new pitch now. I'm a very big fan of Imperial Yeast. They have killer customer service. Shout out to Nina. They've always helped us out in a pinch. We love the product. We use their harvest strain for our lagers. 45 grams of gypsum. Morning, Adam. 255 grams of calcium chloride. Just as a heads up, if you're playing with calcium chloride at home in your brewery, when it gets hydrated, it generates heat. I have been burnt with it in the past by foolishly mixing it with hot water too close to my hand. So don't do that to yourself. 255 grams of calcium chloride. Now, water chemistry is not something that I am an expert on. I have a very, I would just say, functional knowledge. There's a lot of people that understand from a chemistry standpoint what's going on better than I do, but I kind of break it down into layman's terms. I don't know if you can see this, but it kind of looks like little snowballs. Functionally, what I do with this is I run a water program called Brewing water, which is great. I would recommend you check it out. You need to have a full-on water report for your base water. I've used Word Labs for that in the past, which are very helpful. And you input all your numbers, and then it tells you the amount of acid you need to use and various things like that as far as calcium, different elements that you want to be adding to your beer. The levers that I pull with this are making sure that my pH is appropriate at all times. I try to make sure I have the appropriate amount of calcium for the beer that I'm making, chloride, and sulfate. You can kind of dial those things up and down to kind of do some fine point manipulations on your beer. I personally think the largest issue is pH and calcium. So anyways, that's what I have going on there. We are about to start recirculating the mash, so come on with me. So I have my mash here of our amber lager airborne that we're going to start recirculating. How this process works is we're going to be dropping the wort down through the mash screen, down through the mash plates, through this sight glass into the grant here, which is a secondary holding vessel for the wort. We're then going to pump off of this back up to the top of the mash bed and recirculate that until that wort runs free of grain. I like to start this off a little bit on the slow side. This is a fine touch valve that we have here. A lot of these butterfly valves, they're either kind of on or off with some fine adjustment. But with this, you have to rotate quite a bit in order to make it move. You're going to see some wort kind of flow through here a little bit. It's going to be real grainy. And then as we go, it's going to start filling up the grant here. Sometimes I give it a quick hit like that and then slow it back down. The idea being if I open up that valve a little bit, I can create some suction and pull any grain that's around the ports underneath the mash screen here and suck that grain in so I can get it recirculated back up to the top. I do like this process to be gentle though. If I pull a whole bunch of pressure on that grain bed, it can compact it and then make it difficult for me to extract that wort and rinse hot water through it to continue to get sugar into the kettle. You can see the grant is filling up. You're gonna see this color kind of change as we go. You're gonna see that roast malt kind of get distributed throughout. I have some lines on here that tell me where I wanna be speed-wise with this. Then I'm going to jump up over here, and I wait for the grant to fill all the way up, and then I'm going to start pumping it back up through this louder Vorlauf line here, returning it to the top of the mash. All right, here we go. This is driven by the pump, by the mash pump. I'm going to click that on, let that run for a couple seconds, a little bit faster, and then dial it down. And then I'm going to go up. This is one of the visual processes that I have to manipulate a little bit. The speed of this happens just with a 1 through 10 dial, and so it's not super exact. And then I'll bring you up here and show you. That's fine. All right, I'm gonna bring you up top and show you what we're looking at here. This is what we're looking at, and then it's dropping down, returning that grain to the mash. I'm sorry, returning that wort to the mash. I'm gonna let that go for 25 minutes. We're gonna see that this grant is going to have less grain in it as we go. This sight glass is gonna continue to clarify. And yeah, after 25 minutes, we will check our sugar conversion on this and get ready to start moving it to the kettle. All right, so I have the Vorlauf going, which is the, let me restate that. Is it Vorlauf? Or, yeah, Vorlauf. Vorlauf in German roughly is recirculation. So I have the Vorlauf going right now, recirculating the wort from the bottom of the mash tun through the mash screen back up to the top, with the point of setting that grain bed and getting that wort to run clear or grain free. I am preparing up the acid for our Sparge, because our Sparge water is too high of a pH, so I need to adjust that down. What I found is, especially on really flavored beers like our lagers, getting this Sparge water pH dialed in lends to big helping hand. These beers are gently flavored enough that if you're pulling tannins, kind of that oversteeped tea kind of thing, or like a real grippy wine type thing, if you're pulling a lot of tannins out of that, it's really going to show in a beer like this. And one of the primary functions of pulling tannin out of your Sparge, out of the latter portion of your runoff, is the pH of the water. So if you can pull that down, it helps create maintain a smooth wort that's going into the kettle. So what I do as far as adjusting pH in the Sparge is I don't have a good way of adjusting the pH of the entire hot liquor tank because of the way my hot liquor tank is built. And so what I do is I add it to this spray bottle. I dilute it with some water just because it makes the measurement and maintenance of it easier. And then I periodically spray it over the top of the mash bed as I'm sparging that hot liquor tank water on top of the grain. So anyways, that's that. And then here's some awesome shots of the yeast. Imperial yeast. Wait, is my mic not working? What the what? I don't know if my mic is working. Maybe I turned it off. Hold on. No, it says it's on. Imperial yeast. Yeast. Imperial yeast. Boom. Imperial lager yeast. All right, we are halfway through the recirc on Airborne Amber Lager from Cartridge Brewing. And I'm going to take you over and look at that. You're going to see there's a lot less grain in it, and it's darker, okay? Now keep in mind, this beer is not going to be this dark by the time it's pouring out of the taps. What's happening is this is like the strongest part of the coffee when you first start brewing, and then you cut a little cup off of there, before all the water's through. It's extra dark. That's kind of what's going on here. This is what's known as the first wort. It's the most sugar dense, the most sweet, the most full flavored. And yeah, we're gonna go look at it. It looks great right now. You can see how much darker it looks. There's a lot less grain in there. Now keep in mind, we have another 10 barrels of hot liquor that we're going to be putting through that mash. So it's going to continue to dilute that color down, and it'll get us more in the range of what we're looking for our amber lager. But again, this kind of highlights, when you look at the recipe, this kind of highlights how much color and also balance that we're going to be pulling out of that roasted malt, that Carafa Special One, that dehusked roasted malt. So, yeah. All right, hey, so I pulled my first wort sample here. It's looking beautiful. The smell on it it's one of my favorite aromas of the brew day. Just kind of that big, dense, concentrated, sweet, big malt bomb, right? Toasty, maybe a little bit of nutty, maybe a hint of caramel, but mostly that caramel impression is pushed up just by the fact that you're smelling such concentrated sugars. Maybe a little hint of roast on it. Smells awesome. I'm going to get a gravity sample on it, and then I'm going to cool it down in our little ice bed here so we can pull our pH on it. So I remembered where it was. Yeah, that looks great. I'm excited. I like these. I like making these lagers. We're looking at about 18, 19 bricks, which is great. I'm going to let this set for a little bit. Check it again in a few minutes. Wait for that to balance out. But I do know that we've had conversion, and we're ready to move on. I'm going to ice this. I'm also going to see if I can make UC in here. Kind of can. That's pretty cool. I can kind of make you see that. Hold on. Boom. Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, I'm shaking like a mug, but you can kind of see. Cool. So I'm gonna let that sit. I'm gonna ice the first wort sample to get a pH on it. And that alarm means that it is time to cut the Recirc, cut the Vorlauf, and start lautering or running that first wort into the kettle. All right, so our Recirc looks great. The temperature on our mash was low 150s, 151 where we want it. I don't know if you can only see part of my face or all of my face. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop taking the wort from the Grant and sending it up to Recirc, but I'm going to stop that pump and then start redirecting the wort over to the kettle. So I'm going to kill that pump, open up the valve to the kettle, and start my runoff. This is part of the process that's really just done by feel. I'm going to slow that down a hair. And then for me and our system, I set a 15-minute timer. I know that every 5 minutes that goes by on this timer means I should be getting about 1 barrel of wort into the kettle. So that's just how I track that. I have notes on my brew log for that. And that's what that's going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to give you some footage of this beer running off into the kettle. Some sideways. You can see it running off at the bottom of the camera there. Bubbling in there, kind of filling up that wreath. It's almost brown right now. It's a real dark amber. But that additional water that we're going to be sparging with is going to be cutting that color. All right. So we're about to start the sparge, which is where we're taking water from the hot liquor tank and spraying it back up on top of the mash bed. We've got about 3 barrels of wort into the kettle, and you're going to see me add my salts to this. I add that right to the top of the grain bed, and then I'm going to start that sparge water, and we're gonna start running that process. So follow me. Everything is over here. All right, cool. All right, I'm going to zero out my flow meter because I want to measure the amount of water that I am sending to the Sparge ring, which I'm opening up right there. I'm spreading the salts over the top of the grain bed, and then I'm going to start sparging. Kick on the kettle pump. Check my flow meter, make sure that's working appropriately. It is. You might be able to hear some of that spraying start to happen up here. I do like to run a couple barrels of wort off before I start sparging. I know people can talk about oxidation and different things by exposing the top of the mash bed. Pardon me. It's not something that I'm super concerned about. Read some interesting research that was done at CBC a few years ago as far as talking about kind of maximizing the mash efficiency and richness of wort that you're extracting to the kettle. And this was one of the techniques they talked about, of running some of the most dense wort off first and then starting your sparge. I don't know if it works. It's something that I enjoy doing, something that feels good. I mean, I feel right about it, so it didn't seem to be hurting things, so we do it. All right, we've got that grain bed covered up now with sparge water. I'm gonna slow it down a little bit. And then this is when you're gonna hear this ridiculous squeak. I am gonna start spraying some of this diluted acid on top of the mash bed periodically. I have it ratioed out on my brew log. How many gallons of sparge water need to be hitting the mash bed in order for me to hit it with 5 ounces of diluted acid. Again, diluted acid, so don't come at me in the comments about 5 ounces for every 60 gallons. 5 ounces is 75% food grade phosphoric acid. It's diluted, baby. Just take it easy. And what I do with this is my spray bottle holds 25 ounces. I divide my mash water, my sparge water. I divide my sparge water by 5. So for this, I know every 60 gallons of sparge water that I have to use, I have to get through 5 ounces of this diluted acid. Again, the idea is that I'm helping to adjust up the pH of that sparge water with the idea of not extracting tannins out of this beer. So it's kind of cool. I'll try to give you a visual right now of what this sparge looks like. I'm positive one of these days I'm going to be dropping this camera in to the kettle or whatever. You can see that sparge going on. By now it's covered. The grain bed is covered with sparge water, and we're rinsing additional sugars out of that mash. You can see a little bit of that roast malt, that crushed up roast malt on top as well. Every once in a while I panic and look and see if I'm actually recording, but you know, most of the times I am. Okay, so we're still right here at the beginning of the sparge. I'm getting close to having my first 60 gallons in, which is just 1/5 of the amount of water that's going to be going, that's going to be used for the sparge. Again, I'm just dosing it with this diluted acid as I go, so I can make sure that my sparge water is the appropriate pH. I think it's kind of especially important when we are talking about using roast malt for balance in a beer like this. When you have roast malt in there, things can already try to get a little bit astringent. So controlling pH in this mash step, I think, is pretty important. So I'm just gonna stay up on top of this. Josh already has the fermenter sanitized. We have the yeast out, coming up to temp a little bit. We don't want that super cold when it goes into the fermenter. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep tracking this mash. I think I might switch over to time-elapse for you. Time-elapse, time-elapse. Okay, so we're in the middle of the Sparge. We're running off to the kettle. We've got about 6 barrels in the kettle. I've got a little time to run my pH here. Got my pH meter right here. I'm gonna pretend like this is going smoothly even though it's not. There you go. All right, so I have my cooled wort sample right here. And again, this is the first wort off the kettle. I'm a sucker for cornrows, man, I run Jose. Boom, plugged in. All right, so we're gonna get our pH reading here shortly. Yeah, this is a beer that I make quite a bit. Should come out to about 5.3, 5.35, right around in there. We'll let that sit for a few, and we will come back and test it. All right, we are settling out for our pH number to right around 5.35, 5.36, kind of like we figured, like we've done it before. So anyways, we have that. Everything's looking good there. We're running off to the kettle, and everything looks pretty snazzy right now. Sweet, awesome. Yeah, just right underneath it. Rad, I appreciate it, man. It'll make pouring on that so much easier. All right, so we are done sparging on Airborne Amber Lager, and we are knocking the last portion of the wort into the kettle. I'll show you how amber golden it is right now on the sight glass. It's lightened up considerably from before. That's because that's that lighter portion of the wort, that more dilute portion of the wort that's going through. We're done sparging. We're up to about 13.5 barrels right now on the kettle. We're taking that up to 18. And in the meantime, we're just going around kind of cleaning, picking up. We'll be graining out soon, getting the grain out of the mash tun. And yeah, that's kind of the update there. We have the steam on the kettle. We're up to 187 degrees. And that's kind of the deal. So we'll keep you in the loop. Just some bad quality audio B-roll. So we're looking at the mash bed right now. Clearly it looks pretty dry. We have a lot of the grain out of it. Let me see if I can create a lighted situation here. We have most of the grain most of the wort out of the mash tun at this point. We're just running the last portion of wort over to the kettle. Right now we're getting close on the kettle to full. And then at that point, once we have kettle full, we're gonna grain out the mash tun. Of course, I'll get you footage of that. And yeah, I just want to give you every bit and piece of this brew day. Josh is moving the grain bin into place here, and we will grain this boy out. So yeah, man, we're getting real close to kettle full. We're at 17 barrels right now. We're going up to 18. Okay. We are dumping the wort off of the kettle. Dumping the wort off of the mash tun. We have kettle full. We're at 204 degrees. We're graining out the mash tun here shortly. And yeah, we're coming up to a boil, all that good stuff. So yeah, Josh's gonna start emptying. Check it out. also going to take a sample of the last runnings. This is going to let us know the pH and sugar that is coming out of this grain here. Great, we're at about 4, which is fine. I'll see if I can. I don't think you can see a darn thing. I tried. I'm also pulling a pH sample, running a pH sample on my runoff wort here. At this point, you can really see that this last wort off the kettle, like we said, was going to be lighter in color. You can see right here. I want to really see that be really close to 5.5. That's what I've been doing with it. So we'll track that. Josh is graining out. Lots of cool stuff. I'm going to go right up there in just a second and pull a gravity sample, Josh, and then I'll start helping you out with what you have going on there. Right behind you. I like to take the sample right off the rolling edge of the kettle so I can make sure that it is nice and turned over. Homogeneous, I believe, is the term right behind. I'm going to get this sample back in an ice bath, cool that down for my pH test, and I'm also going to give a quick rinse here to my hydrometer so I can see how much sugar I have in the kettle. All right, let's see what this reads. Great, dude, we're spot on. We're in a really good space, yeah. Awesome, that's cooling. I'm gonna get on this rake for you and we'll start tearing it up. I'm gonna move that rake forward a little bit so I'm not dropping that just in that big cavern there. Actually, I'm just gonna turn it a little bit, let that break down some before I drop the rake. Our rake typically works pretty well. I'm recording right now, Josh, just so you know. Our rake typically works pretty well. I'll get you some footage here in just a second at helping to at dropping the plow on it and getting it to behave and really kind of grain out for you, which is really the preferred situation. Okay, we've got the kettle starting to roll over here. We're up to 210.5 degrees. Then we have our rake going over here, turning and helping to grain out the mash tun. There's Josh pulling grain out. How's that working, Josh? Yeah, boy. Now we're just getting some beautiful sweeping footage of our historic building here. You didn't realize that this was going to be the kind of footage you were going to get. Just high level. I like to under promise and then just over deliver. I mean, does it get like better than this? It just has to be a dream for you, you know? For hop additions, hey man, this is just setting up. This is the kettle rolling. It can be some B-roll, whatever. I'm going to do my hop addition here shortly, and I'll talk my way through that with you. So right now it's just some steamy B-roll. Steamy B-roll. Yeah, they're going down tonight. Here in a couple minutes, we're going to do our 60-minute edition of hops on Airborne Vienna Lager. This is the only hop edition, and I'm doing a little bit over 7 pounds of Hersbrucker hops. I've done a couple of different things with this beer. I've done Warrior Magnum higher alpha hops here, It reduces the volume of hot matter going into the kettle. And I've also done what I'm doing today, which is adding a larger volume of lower alpha acid hops. So I'm using the 4% alpha acid Herzbrucker. The idea behind me using that rather than a smaller volume of higher alpha hop is I'm playing a little bit of a game between trying to drive clarity downstream on this beer. I can use a couple of pounds of a high alpha acid hop here. The higher the alpha acid on a hop just means the greater its potential for creating bitterness. When I'm using a lower alpha acid hop like this and more of it to create that same level of bitterness, I'm doing it primarily because I've read some research on balancing the amount of protein coming from your malt and the amount of polyphenol that's coming from your hops. If you can raise that level of polyphenol coming from the hops and balance that out with the amount of protein you're getting from the malt, those things will lock together, form larger particulate, and then fall out, creating a clearer wort. That is the dummy explanation of it. So you people that actually understand science might be screaming right now, but that's what I'm doing right here. That's what I'm chasing. That's my timer. So it's time for me to do my 60-minute boil on my hops. Today I'm using 7 pounds of Herzbrucker hops. That's going to get me the 22 IBUs that I need for this Vienna lager that we're making. One of the biggest differences going from doing this at home to the pro side is I'm always very careful about how quickly I'm adding these hop additions. Sometimes when you add hops to the kettle, it can kick the boil up and make it want to boil over. A boil over is never good, whether it's 6 gallons that you have going on your turkey fryer or something fancier that you have for home brewing, or really any size system. But the last thing you want is to be having this stuff come out of the kettle. It's one of the biggest safety issues. The problem is obviously you don't want to get burnt by liquid. There's a difference though between getting burned with water and getting burned with a sugar-dense solution like wort. Water will hit you and burn you and then lose temperature. Sugar-dense liquids like wort will continue to stay hot and keep burning. So I add these hops slowly to let that kettle kind of turn over and eat it up. Make sure that it doesn't want to come out after me. And to be honest, if you're a pro that's watching this saying he's adding them way too slowly, I don't care about that. You know what I mean? If you're more confident adding them faster, that's great. For me, I'm not. This makes me feel a little bit safer. And that's how I do that. If it takes me 2 extra minutes to do this process, I can live with it. All right, so that is my 7 pounds, 5 ounces of Herzbrucker hops at 60 minutes. We've already been boiling for 30 minutes. We do 90-minute boils here. I've got my 1 hour timer set for my 60-minute boil on this bitterness strike that I just did. And that's going to be it for the kettle. I'm going to be adding some yeast nutrient, and I'm going to be adding some Vorlauf late in the kettle to help pull together the solids, the protein, trub, anything like that, any grain particulate that ended up getting through. But that's the idea. Right now, really the majority of my time is going to be cleanup, monitoring this, and making sure everything's in line for the rest of the day. Sometimes there's also a little bit of paperwork time, me catching up on records, logs, things like that, while monitoring this to make sure it's staying happy. Okay, so one of the things that we set up while the boil is going, we are going to be pulling water off of our CLT right here, our cold liquor tank. That is the tank that will keep water at about 40 degrees for us, 38, 40 degrees. And we will push that water through one of the halves of the heat exchanger. Today we're brewing a lager. We're brewing airborne amber lager, Vienna lager. And so we will be utilizing said pump, water into the face of it, cold water out and into this panel over here, which will lead to our heat exchanger. Boom. Okay. We actually have two water sources. That red hose right here hooked up to the top. That's hooked up to city water to the other half of the heat X. So we use that CLT in particular when we need to get wort really cold, when we need a lot of really cold water going through there to knock the wort out at an even colder temperature. And it also helps us knock out more quickly and everything like that. It gives us more cooling capacity. So that's one of the things that we set up. We'll also be hooking up a oxygen source to that valve that is covered up by that little cup right now. That will be oxygen going into the cold wort on its way to the tank. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes left in the boil on our airborne Vienna lager. And so at this point, I'm going to be adding a yeast nutrient. Yeast nutrient especially is important on when you're going to be harvesting yeast. People have different ideas on this, to be honest. There's different debate about how much of this gets through into the fermenter. I do it. My supplier recommends it. Could they just be slinging it to me? I don't know, but I do it. Anyways, it's a zinc-rich yeast that I'm using called Cerevomyces. I slurry it up just so I know it's not going to clump up a bunch. I add it to the kettle with about 15 minutes left. Really, at this point, there's only one other step before we're done with the boil. I am going to be adding some Whirlfloc. Two words combined there are whirl for whirlpool, and then flock or flocculation. It's an additive that is meant to help clarify the kettle, to make small particulate clump together, get larger and heavier. And then when I whirlpool that kettle and then allow it to stop, it'll create a cone of that protein, grain husk, grain particulate, different things like that. And it'll pull that trube cone into the center, so I'll be able to draw more clear wort off the side of the kettle. It's just an efficiency thing. It helps me to get more volume out of the kettle and also clearer wort. So I will see you in a few minutes when we add the Whirlfloc. All right, so we only have 5 minutes left in the brew day for airborne, and we are going to be throwing our Whirlfloc in. Whirlfloc is just tablets like this. This is going to help create larger particulate in the kettle, so they will drop out. I'll be able to separate the protein, the trube, any of the grain particle that happened to made it through this far through the process. That'll help to cone that up in the center of the kettle after the whirlpool, and it'll help me pull more clear wort out of the kettle. As with anything, when I add this stuff, I always stick around to make sure that it's going to take it all right. Again, one of my biggest concerns is that I will be getting some sort of boil over situation. It's probably one of the things, tripping, falling off of stuff, yeah, all that stuff too. But boil over, especially from a managerial standpoint, is one of the things that I'm very concerned about, and things like that. Really, all this is about, this whole thing is about doing these processes safely. That's what I always tell the people that I'm training. So anyways, we only have a handful of minutes before we kill the steam and end our 90-minute boil. At that point, we will spin the kettle by turning the kettle pump on and opening up the whirlpool arm, and it'll start circulating that wort in there. We're only going to do that for about 5 minutes, turn it off. We're going to let it rest for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll be able to start running it through the heat exchanger to the fermenter. I just said in the last clip that I'm going to be turning on, I'm going to be turning the steam off the kettle, but before I do that, I will be opening up the whirlpool valve, and I will be opening up the kettle drain. So what's going to happen is wort is going to come out of that kettle drain, go over here, come out into this pump, and go back and around here, okay? So what this will do is, this union right here, this is where the wort will come out from the kettle, and this port right here will either let me send it to the Whirlpool over there or to the heat exchanger over here. But I'm just gonna walk you through everything. I'll be turning off the steam. I'm gonna show you every time I hit a switch, and I'll be flipping the camera around. So maybe it'll be garbage, maybe it won't. But anyways, we're coming up real close on my timer for the kettle. Here's my timer for the kettle, and the cutest baby ever. All right, there's our timer for the kettle, meaning that our 90-minute boil is done. I'm gonna turn the steam off I'm gonna turn the steam off to the kettle, and then I'm going to turn the Whirlpool pump. Come on. All right, brew kettle off, secondary valve closed. The heat is now off the kettle. I'm closing the door, coming down here. I am turning on the kettle pump to 6. My Whirlpool valve is open. My kettle drain is open, so it's being pumped from the bottom of the kettle back up into the Whirlpool. And we're gonna see this wort starting to turn a little bit now. A little bit of vortex, big kick of steam. Very difficult to see in there, but believe me, it's spinning. We're gonna let that spin for 5 minutes, and then we'll shut it off and let it settle for 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll start running off through the heat exchanger to the fermenter. All right, this is the end of the Whirlpool for me. So I'm coming over, I'm killing the kettle pump. Then I'm coming over and I'm closing the Whirlpool valve, boom. And I'm also just gonna close the kettle drain. What's coming up next is, I had mentioned before that this connection point right here can either send me up and over to the Whirlpool or up and over to the heat exchanger. So that's where the wort is gonna go next. I just need to open up the heat exchanger inlet valve, and that will allow the wort to then run through the heat exchanger to the fermenter. I already have our water hooked up, so yeah, I'll hook my gas up and that'll be it. We're gonna take you through this knockout process right now. Josh, can you turn both water sources on, please? It's just the valve right there, and then back on the brew house for the city water. Our CLT water engaged. And Josh, we're gonna turn that pump on to 25 when we, you can actually kick it on real quick and just set it to 25 and then turn it off. 20, oh, I'll dialed in, baby. Dialed in. All right, about 30 seconds left. All right, so what we have going on is right now we are kind of pre-cooling the heat exchanger with the last couple minutes here, with the last little bit here before we start running off. We have cold water coming from the CLT that we will be pumping through, and we have city water that are running through one of those two sources. The city water is actually recaptured back into the HLT, already hot, so that is some water savings there. And as soon as this alarm goes off, we're gonna start knocking out this kettle. All right, Josh, I think we're all set, man. I think gas is not on, but we'll turn that on when we start doing our thing. Do you want to open over there? So that's 1. This will be 2. The heat exchange. Just the valve. Yeah, both of those open. Yep. And then just the one to the tank closed. Correct. And then what we're going to do is we're going to walk this backwards, and so that means we're going to go heat exchanger, and then kettle bottom, and we're going to start getting that through. Okay. And then I am going to follow you through this. You should be able to turn it up to about, when you turn the pump on, it'll be 1, it'll be that valve, it'll be the kettle drain, and then turn the pump on to at least 7, I think. and then we'll start tracking it, and I'm gonna walk through. Go ahead, start running through, hit the drain. All right, and so what's gonna start happening is we're gonna start pushing liquid through that hose right here. That's running all the way around. It's kicking out here. It's kicking out, let's do this. It's kicking out here, let that go longer. All right, cut it right there. All right, and then we're gonna see some pressure build in our blow-off bucket here. If everything is going well. If our tank is appropriately sealed. Let's see here. Boom, there it is. Okay, cool. I'll get your gas on, Josh. All right, I just turned the gas on, the CO2 on, and we're gonna bump open the sight glass. And we got O2 going through into the cold wort, running through this line here. And try this again. Running through this line here. All the way over to here. It's popping off right there. Everything's good. Now in just a minute we're going to be adding the new pitch of yeast to the top of the tank. And we're going to get moving. We're going to check and make sure that we're running off at 50 degrees, which is where I want to be running off for this lager. And should be good. I always like to ISO the top of this yeast container a couple of times prior to opening that up and getting ready to use it. Imperial Harvest, 17 liters. Going in our 16.5 barrel batch. All right, we're gonna add this yeast. I think you'll be able to see us up there. I have been ISOing this, this yeast container repeatedly because I have OCD. I also ISO my gloves. I make sure that I have some good clean gloves on, nothing that I've been doing like a lot of work with. So everything is good and happy. I'm gonna have Josh bring the yeast over to me. I'll take the lid off of it, Josh. You can just let it run here. Even when I climb the ladder, I try not to really use the primary portion of my gloves. And what we're going to be leaning on when we do this is some of the positive pressure in the tank. This thing is going to want to pop a little bit when I take this off. Am I wearing safety glasses? Good. Sometimes these get stuck on. Boom. I'm going to want to turn this as quickly as I can. Again, I've been ISOing my gloves. So there is a little bit of pressure on this container. I'm going to set this up here. I'm going to knock this with my sanitized knuckle. Peel out the paper and then start pouring in the yeast. Thank you. All right, pitching a fresh new pitch of Imperial Harvest Lager yeast on airborne amber lager. We're knocking out at 50 degrees, meaning that we are sending the wort into this fermenter at 50 degrees. We have currently 12.5 barrels left to go. And we'll just keep an eye on the temp. Things are looking pretty good. I am going to be pulling a sample off of that knockout port over here in order to test pH and final gravity of this beer. And beyond that, that's really it. And then it's just a whole bunch of cleanup, which is most of what we do anyway. Let's take a sample of this wort that we're running to the fermenter. Need to glove up, grab a container. With that sample, we're both going to test pH and the gravity. So this is what you're going to see. All right. I'm going to blow a little bit of wort through here and dump it just to make sure. I want to make sure I have a quality sample, nothing that's been sticking back in the line, or I don't know. Sometimes I just assume in that channel I can get something that not like a fully homogeneous sample or whatever. That might be crazy on my part. But now off to test this stuff out. The color on this looks great. Quite happy with it. Let me grab a flashlight and I'll see if I can get you a decent view of the sight glass on airborne amber lager moving to the fermenter. Too bright. Probably nothing, but anyway, you do the best you can. All right, mic check. Okay, so we have our sample off the runoff line. We are going to check pH and gravity on this, dumping the kettle sample that we did earlier. Boom. Turning the pH meter on, and let me get a little sample of this for my gravity sample. We'll see how everything worked today. Beautiful. Got about 13.3 bricks. That pH number we'll have in just a minute. We're looking at about 5.1 on that pH number, 5.15. Honestly, I'm gonna have to dig back a little bit. I don't know if I might be looking at trying to drop that number a little bit with some acid in the kettle, but we'll see. Anyways, that's all part of like the constant growth thing. You learn new things and keep trying to implement it. So anyhow, that's where we're at right now. And that's really a wrap on this thing. There's gonna be cleanup afterwards. We're going to knock out all the clear wort and then rinse everything out and spin it with hot caustic today. Spin the heat exchanger both ways. And then that's really it. And then we just wrap up and head home. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you feel as if you got any value out of the video, please like and subscribe. There are also other videos that you can watch. They're gonna maybe be over here or over here. Appreciate you watching.